More examples. Billions of no-bid, no-string attached contracts have been handed out in New Orleans and Iraq and at Walter Reed Medical Center on the sole basis of who you know and the favors you've done. And yet we're somehow surprised when the families in the Ninth Ward are still living in trailers, or our soldiers don't have the body armor they need, or our veterans are forced to come home to squalor and neglect. This is not the government they deserve. This is not the America we believe in. And this is the kind of politics that will end when I am president. You know, Americans of every background and every belief are hungry. They're hungry for a new kind of politics, a politics that's based on people and reconnects them to their government, one that offers not just a vote at the ballot box, but a voice in Washington and an assurance that the leaders we send there will hear it. The people I've met all across the country don't just want reform for reform's sake. They're not just do-gooders. They want reform that will help them pay their doctor's bill. They want reform to ensure that their tax dollars are being spent wisely. They want reform to put us on the path to energy independence. They want real reform, and they're tired of the lobbyists standing in the way. Now, look, we can't begrudge businesses for trying to make a profit. That's how the free market works. And every American, rich or poor, has the right to organize and the right to lobby their government. That's all perfectly fine. But it's time we had a president who tells the drug companies and the oil companies and the insurance companies that while they get a seat at the table in Washington, they don't get to buy every chair. Not anymore. I also know that every campaign, politicians make promises about cleaning up Washington. And most times, you, the voters, will end up disappointed because it doesn't happen. So it's easy to become cynical, to believe that change is impossible, that the odds are too great, that this year is bound to be no different from the last. But I also know what I've seen, and I know what I've done. I know that for me, reform isn't just the rhetoric of a campaign. It's been one of the causes of my career. When I arrived in Springfield, Illinois, a decade ago as a state senator, people said it was too hard to take on the issue of money in politics. Illinois actually had a law that allowed politicians to pocket the money in their campaign accounts for personal use. They could build home additions and other. It's hard to believe, I know, but this is true. There were laws that allowed any lobbyist or special interest to shower lawmakers with unlimited gifts. There were no limits. It was obvious that as long as this went on, the people's business would never come first. I knew it was going to be tough, and I wasn't going to make myself the most popular guy in town, or even in my own party. But we had the people of Illinois on our side, and there were folks on both sides of the aisle who were willing to listen. And so we were finally able to pass the first major ethics reform in 25 years. When I arrived in Washington, 8 years later, the need for change was equally clear. Big money and lobbyists were clearly drowning out the aspirations of the American people. So when my party made me the point person on ethics, I was determined to pass the strongest reform possible. The first time came around, the Congress watered down the version of the bill that we had passed. And as a consequence, I was proud to vote against it. So when we came back the second time, and in our bill, we banned gifts and meals and put an end to subsidized travel on corporate jets, I was equally proud to make sure that that bill passed. We made sure that the American people could see all the pet projects that lawmakers were trying to pass before they were voted on. And we did something more. Over the objections of powerful voices in both parties, we shined a bright light on how lobbyists help fill the campaign coffers of members of Congress. And we made sure those lobbyists will have to disclose who they're raising money from and who in Congress they're funneling it to. As a candidate for president, I've tried to lead by example, turning down all contributions from federal lobbyists and the political action committees that the special interests use to pass out campaign money. Now, it's true that all this represents a step forward when it comes to reconnecting people with their government. But it's also true that a step forward isn't good enough. Too often in Washington, special interests still exercise an effective veto on our progress on issues from health care reform and drug costs to energy independence and global warming.